Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. Today is Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. It is 8:30 a.m. and we are in conference room 329. This is a hearing on the Committee on Health and Homelessness. So welcome to all of you. For those of you who are participating via Zoom, please chat with our House technical staff. If we should lose power, we will adjourn and post another notice for the hearing. Please do not use copyrighted material in your background pictures, as this will prevent us from being able to post the video, I believe, on YouTube. So welcome. For those of you in the audience as well as on Zoom, I do not typically impose time limits, but encourage testifiers to stand on their testimony or highlight key points so we can have ample time for question and answers by the committee members as well as discussion. Today is a very busy day. Tomorrow is going to be our first lateral filing deadline, so there will be lots and lots of activity. People will be bouncing in and out of rooms today and tomorrow, so just please bear with us. First up on this agenda on the Committee on Health and Homelessness is House Bill 1852, making an appropriation to the Department of Emergency Services of the City and County of Honolulu for their core program. Members, we've had a lot of discussion about this program over the interim. We know that the EMS of the City and County of Honolulu is doing some amazing work. So here with late testimony is City and County of Honolulu, Honolulu Emergency Services Department.
Hi, good morning. Is this on? Okay. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Again, Ian Santi. I am the Deputy Director of the Honolulu Emergency Services Department. With me again, Director Ireland is here, as well as our branch chief, Kathy Higa, who is overseeing our operational aspect of our core program. We ask for your continued support of our core program. The request of $3.5 million through the testimony explains what goes to salaries, current expenses, and equipment. This is to expand the program out to the Central Oahu, Waipahu area, west side, and provide more services to the City and County of Honolulu. Our core program has been very impactful, we believe, in the central downtown urban core area, Chinatown, and the Waikiki area. We've had successes in the last 2 years of about 55 or so people that we've been able to house into some type of housing. And again, as with homelessness, everybody understands that there are some challenges that people do face that result because of the homelessness or that cause them to go into homelessness. And we are working with a different approach of applying our medical needs, looking and focusing on the medical needs of the individual to try and facilitate that. We're here pending any questions.
Okay. Please stay there, Mr. Santi. Any other testifiers? Seeing none, members' questions. Representative Kobayashi.
What's the breakout of the 3.5 million? It doesn't add up with the numbers you provide.
That should be the it's for the biennium, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's for the biennium budget. So that's why if the first year is like 1 point, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a salaries inclusive of the fringe, inclusive of the current expenses, and then the equipment for the first year. I can get you a better detail, Representative, after this if that doesn't add up correctly.
Too late.
Any other questions? Mr. Santi, I have a question. We've had a lot of discussion about the development of EMS statewide and then what your particular county is doing to kind of really pilot, because we let you folks go from the statewide system. When you look at other communities and you see the statewide emergency systems in other places, the state system can function as a grant agency. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think this is really interesting. I think you are the only, other counties are doing community paramedicine, but not to the degree that you folks are doing it. One, because of the scale of Honolulu, but also because you guys have really built it out. So when we look at statewide EMS systems across the nation, how do they fund their county operations?
Okay, no, thank you for the question, Chair. And again, looking at nationally, right, the one reason why the City and County of Honolulu one reason for the state of Hawaii, we are the only state in the entire United States where the state actually funded the EMS system. Counties, towns, cities throughout the nation, they're funded through specific taxes or specifically through grants. I can't speak specifically to the neighbor islands, but I can speak as a whole and what we're familiar with nationally wise. And state EMS offices throughout the United States do have grants where the counties do apply for it or cities do apply through their office for grants to support their EMS system. And if that opportunity existed here, I think that would be a great opportunity statewide for the different counties to apply for grants through the state EMS office for particular projects or for particular equipment and so forth that they weren't able to fund through their regular budget.
I think this is a really important conversation because, again, EMS is evolving. You know, other counties may be looking at what you folks are doing and may want to replicate it or not. The question is still out. But to understand how the state might be able to even fund as large a county as the city and county of Honolulu is something that we should explore. And I guess this is also a leading question because in the way the bill is drafted, I'm not sure that through the 42F process, we can actually give you a grant and aid.
Understood.
So this is something that I think, like, if we had to find the correct funding mechanism, it could possibly be through the Department of Health, the EMS service system, and then it would be a grant that could then be tailored toward community paramedicine programs or things within the scope of emergency medical services. So does that seem to make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense, and we look for the opportunity for whatever way that the state is willing to give the city funding. So we were willing to work with the state for this venture.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for being here this morning. I know that this testimony and the notice might not have been gone out fast enough or with enough time, but thank you for being here to testify.
No, thank you.
Members, moving on to House Bill 1941, making an emergency appropriation to the Department of Health to implement quality improvement recommendations for the Hawaii State Hospital. First up, we have in support Department of Health.
Good morning, Chair Albaladi, Vice Chair Takenouchi, members of the House Committee. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the sponsors of this bill. My name is Kenneth Luke. I'm the administrator of Hawaii State Hospital, the Department of Health, which the Hawaii State Hospital is a part of. We stand on our written testimony in support of this bill. I do want to say that Hawaii State Hospital is going through a very challenging time now, that we are licensed for 297 beds. We currently have 345 patients housed in the facility as of this morning. The types of patients that we're getting are much sicker than we got maybe a decade ago. These are patients who have not only a chronic and severe mental illness, but they also have co-occurring conditions, oftentimes a substance use disorder or primarily methamphetamine. This really complicates their conditions, makes them much more acute, much more difficult to treat. The social determinants of health on the persons coming in are much more complicated. That 70% of our patients coming in are coming in from being houseless. That means that they are more unstable usually coming in than in past years. We're trying our best. I've said in other committees that the hospital staff, really the best staff that any hospital could ask for, because they're managing, they're taking good care of the patients. But I feel that we owe them what we can to make the place safer. Hospitals in general are dangerous places, and that's a sad commentary that healthcare facilities have become places that are dangerous to work. But Hawaii State Hospital does have risks, and anything like in this bill that can mitigate that risk, the department is in support of. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you folks may have.
Okay, I think there's going to be a lot of questions. So as we listen to the other testimony, if you can, what I understand is that this bill in front of us does not actually reflect the entire appropriation that's being requested. And so if you can be, when you come back up, be able to provide us with some of those updated numbers, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
But we'll move on to the next testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, in support, Disability and Community Access Board, Kirby Shaw, in support. In support, Lou Erdeshik, Hawaii Disability Rights Center. We have testimony in support from Billy Yotaka. Any late testimony? Okay. Any testifiers via Zoom? No. Any testifiers in the room? Okay, seeing none, members, questions? Okay, Dr. Luke, I have some questions. It says in your testimony that a concurrent governor's message provides a more comprehensive needs request. I understand that that amount should be about $14 million or $12 to $14 million. So looking at the bill, can you explain to us what are the additional FTEs you're requesting pursuant to the governor's message that I believe has been sent to Budget and Finance?
Thank you. Correct. It's 14.2 million. If you'll allow me, may I introduce my Associate Administrator for Administrative and Support Services, Naomi Yanagishita, who can answer those questions very accurately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to testify. I'm so sorry I didn't, okay, let's just answer your questions about the positions.
Yes.
All right, okay, so the positions are, the hospital really needs a reorg, right? And so what we are trying to do is separate like one huge section of the hospital. So we would like to have an additional associate administrator plus another kind of sort of chief of staff administrator that would kind of sort of head the a hospital transformation team, right? And so when you look at this bill, okay, so the number one, in section 2, number 1, those 4 positions are for the chief of staff and 2 or 3 project managers to help the hospital with transformation. The second one is for a dedicated facilities team. And in this facilities unit, we wanted to create a whole safety and security team in there and telecommunications. So that's all kind of part of the reorg. And then this 27 full-time equivalent is, I believe it is miscellaneous positions throughout the department. But one big aspect of this is that we don't have our own IT team. And so what we need is another IT team in this. And so I believe maybe about 15 of these positions are there. I will get you details for the remaining 12 positions. I'm so sorry I don't have that. And then the 8 full-time equivalent clinical are just for clinical people, right? Oh, they're not. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So I guess, are we not requesting this anymore? This 8? Okay.
Okay, so we can strike the 8.
Yeah, so we can strike the 8, right? And the $4.5 million was for the salaries that are needed for all of these positions, right? And I guess that number will probably change too, right? You also can strike number 6, $325,000 for equipment. The $650,000 for telecommunications and networking is, number 1, the hospital has cameras that are not functioning, right? We have 3 different PA systems that need to be integrated, right? And yeah, the whole networking thing needs to, the whole PA system, telecom system needs to be upgraded. I think we have phones dating back to the 1970s, right? And then $500,000 for miscellaneous improvements to the campus. Just little things here and there, right? But the campus is very old and it just needs a lot of work. Okay. And I guess that's it. Any other questions?
So, I guess little things. Can you explain that further? Because I've been told previously, like ligature fixes. Is this new building fixes? What are these fixes for?
Okay. I'm Marian Suji. I'm the Deputy Director for Behavioral Health, and that my responsibility is also oversee the hospital. So I'm sorry, Chair, your question again?
This 500,000 for miscellaneous improvements to campus facilities, it sounds like it's CIP requests, so what types of CIP
Okay.
requests are they?
So in the governor's message, we asked for 700,000 for CIP, and that would be to relocate the guard shack. Right now, it's over to the side of the road. We'd like to have it relocated to the middle so that people actually stop. Very often, people don't even notice that there's a guard shack there, and they'll just zoom straight on up.
Okay, and that's other little things? What are these for fixes?
For CIP.
Okay, so there's the guard check, and I know that.
And
in
then on
other-
the equipment side, it's, as Naomi just explained, the PA system, integrating it, repairing and replacing the camera system, as well as purchasing metal detectors, the wands, so that when folks go off campus and they come back onto campus, that they can do that. And also for urinalysis testing and reagents to support the testing.
Okay. My understanding is that the GM is part of, it's supposed to be about $14 million, so what you've outlined so far does not amount to $14 million. What else is in the GM?
So one of the things that's kind of adding to the population over at the hospital is the inability to place people in group homes. So they get held back until an opening happens. So there are two licensed crisis shelters that we're asking for, and 2 additional 24-hour supervised houses. And those would be contracted out, so those would go into purchase of services. And in addition to that, there's also an adjustment, a rate adjustment that we're asking for all of our group homes. We're in the process of doing a rate study, and we know that that rate study is going to bring us up 20-25% because there hasn't been a rate increase for, in some cases, 10 years or more. So we're asking for a partial increase so that we can keep the group homes that are existing to continue with us.
Okay, so I understand, and I really appreciate the fact that you folks have been working on this emergency appropriation. I know that there's been conversations about the governor's message, and this, of course, stems from the tragedy that happened and the need to ensure that the facilities are safe for all of our employees. I also understand, though, that there is some question about forensic beds at Kahimohala, adult beds. That, what is the situation with that? Should the operations at Kahimohala change for some reason?
So one of the things that we're trying to do right now is to decrease that census in preparation for taking the folks that are over at Kahi back over to the hospital. Kahi Sutter is looking to sell to Queens, and Queens has indicated that the forensic patients will no longer be serviced at that campus.
So some of this is also in anticipation that you have to renovate beds at
It's
which.
really to process people a whole lot quicker than what we've been doing. We're short forensic psychologists, evaluators at the courts as well as at the hospital. And so if we can get those evaluations done quicker, the court can process them quicker. Right now, there are delays because the evaluations aren't getting into the judge's hands in a timely fashion.
Okay. With the contract that we have with Sutter for those adult beds at Kahi, because it appears that we might be taking those beds back in, do those monies flow and follow the patients? Do you understand what I'm saying? So we pay for beds at
Correct.
Kahi.
Yes,
And by not having those beds anymore there, the money will flow back through the contract to DOH to be able to fund some of the things that need to be done.
correct.
So there's no additional ask for those 40 beds, is there? Or is there?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, this is going to be a topic that's kind of be of discussion. We look forward to seeing the more detailed governor's message. A lot of these budget items are kind of murky at best, but as we get closer and finalize the budget, please keep this committee apprised. We have numerous members on our committee on finance. So we need to understand what the needs are of the department as we move forward with this bill and the other measures that will probably be taken up to address this very serious matter.
Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your support. I do believe that Dr. Luke just explained that when this emergency appropriation was prepared and the list was given, it was very, very shortly after the incident. We hadn't completed a more thorough review and vetting of what we were asking for. So that's kind of explains some of the changes in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Thank you to the members of the DOH team. Moving on to House Bill 2341, members, this is funding for the Tobacco Enforcement Special Fund. First up, we have Department of Health in support. Thank you. We have comments from Department of Taxation.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Gary Sugunuma, Director of Taxation. It's only Section 3 of the bill that pertains to the Department of Taxation. And as noted in our testimony, the department is able to administer the change in Section 3 of the bill as is currently drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. Testimony in support, Attorney General's Office, Mr. Stacy.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rich Stacy. I'm the Unit Supervisor for the Tobacco Enforcement Unit at the Department of the Attorney General. Thank you for hearing this bill. We're in strong support. Our Tobacco Enforcement Special Fund is primarily funded through cigarette tax, stamp tax revenue. We are required to follow the MSA and enforce the MSA, which involves things like we run a directory, we screen what cigarettes are sold in Hawaii, we go after non-compliant sellers, we have inspectors that go out all over the island. They did over 1,600 inspections last year. Last April, we took in $40.8 million of annual MSA money, and that is because we are doing our diligent enforcement. However, as we notice, cigarette sales go down, cigarette tax stamps revenues go drastically down. And what I want to emphasize is that because cigarette sales go down does not mean we have to stop doing what we do. What we do is not tied to that. What we do is we enforce the MSA and hopefully make sure we get $40 million a year or $35 million a year. And that goes to the 46.5 goes to the general fund. The rest of it, we get $350,000, and then the others go to the rainy day fund, JABSOM, and Tobacco Prevention Control Trust Fund. But because of the reduction in stamp revenue, we are seeking in 2 ways to increase it. That would increase the MSA initial money we get. So out of the $40.8 million last year, we got $350. We're asking that that get bumped up, and also the carryover at the end of the year to $750, and then a slight change to the tax stamp fee. So all of that should stabilize what we do. We're trying to avoid the risk. Washington just lost last week. We found out 3 years of arbitration. They're going to lose probably $100 million minimum. So we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to do our diligent enforcement, but we just want to stabilize our funding. So I'd ask you to pass the bill, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stacy. I'm going to have a few questions, so don't go away.
Okay.
We had testimony in support from Hawaii Public Health Institute. Thank you. Comments from Tax Foundation of Hawaii? Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. What I'd like to do is turn your attention to page 3 of our testimony. We have a little graph there that we took from the Department of Taxation. It shows what's been happening to cigarette and tobacco tax and license fee revenue over the years. It's been kind of falling off a cliff. And that in part is because that's by design. You want to discourage consumption of this product, so you tax it, and naturally the revenue generated therefrom goes down. At the same time, all of these agencies are coming to you and saying, we need a stable funding source. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't it, for these reasons. So we think as a broader proposition that the committee should be looking for other ways to stabilize the funding sources of the programs you need other than something that's going to drop off over time by design. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and wonderful to see you, Mr. Yamachika. Testimony and support from American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. Any other late testimony? Any testifiers via Zoom? Any testifiers in the room? Members, questions? Mr. Stacey, I have a couple questions. So you have to refresh my recollection. Did we pass a similar bill like this last session and it got to conference? I feel like this is something
Yes,
that,
this went to the last minute Friday night, and I don't think it got heard at the last minute Friday
Okay,
night.
but
I think it was HB 982.
92? And this basically had the same types of provisions.
Yes.
Right.
There was a tiny edit to like the date or something.
Okay.
I'm not sure what else.
Second question, and I'm showing like too many things going on and lack of sleep. Annually, we get monies from the MSA. Is that annual payments supposed to end at a certain time?
No, it's forever as long as cigarettes are sold.
Okay,
So generally, the companies are supposed to pay about $9 billion a year to the states, but that gets modified. So I think last year was about $7 billion. Hawaii gets a percentage of that.
and it's in perpetuity? Okay, so the outcomes of the arbitrations in Washington, that concerns me, right? Because across the nation, we have to, as a state, act with fidelity towards those agreements. What is the process that's happening in those states where they're discovering, what's going on there that's triggering these kinds of arbitrations?
Well, to give you an idea, that last one, the opinion just came out, was for 2005 to 2007. So the arbitrations are that far behind. We are with, as of yesterday, there's 38 other states, including DC and Puerto Rico. So we are we've settled up until last year, and we have a modified settlement that goes forward. So we're at risk of losing half of our annual payment because of that modified settlement. Washington is not in that. They're called an arbitrating state. Some of the problems they had was the attorney generals, they said, were well funded, but not the Department of Revenue, and the two didn't communicate. So that was a big problem in the opinion that just came out. Also auditing, we were, thanks to the legislature in the last budget a year ago, we received a position for an auditor, which we had not had since 2005, and that was in reading the recent opinions, because Washington also lost a couple of years ago, the 2004, and Missouri lost. So we've been reading those opinions and saying, okay, what can we do better? And to be honest about those, like Washington or Missouri, those were the early years of the MSA, so they can't go back in time and say, boy, we should go back and audit. These are things that happened 20 years ago, and now it's going to hearing. So we've been able to avoid that. We were not contested in the 2003 arbitration. We settled along with now 38 other states and territories up until last year. So we are close to settling for a couple more years. So this is a constant thing between us and the tobacco companies where we're trying to do our job better and minimizing the risk to the MSA money.
So the process that's playing out, I'm really trying to understand this,
Yeah.
is they're challenging our use of the funds, and then it will result in a reduction of the allocations that we can get. So this is a way to kind of ensure that we're doing the enforcement.
I think the best, what would be ideal was all the money and the MSA money would go towards diligent enforcement. That's what the tobacco companies would want. So nobody really can do that. Nobody can afford to do that. So they will go after that we didn't do our job to monitor the bad people out there selling the wrong cigarettes. That's the main problem. And so because of the way that MSA is set up, so there's $7 billion a year that goes into it. Out of that, there's called a disputed payment account of about $1 billion recently, and that's what they fight over. And if they find a state like Washington non-diligent, then the tobacco companies can win a couple $100 million just from Washington. So we monitor that very closely. I've been to hearings in Chicago. We're all very aware of the risk, and that's why we want to just stabilize our funding.
Okay. And then just one last kind of legal question. When they trigger the arbitration, is there then a court order that tells the states what they need to do to like either return money or what does that mechanism look like?
So we have an auditor in New York, PwC, that is chosen by all the tobacco companies in all the states. They do all these calculations. We get tons of spreadsheets. And out of that $1 billion, again, the disputed payment account, that's what's at risk in the arbitration. Under the MSA, it's an arbitration panel, so it's 3 retired Article 3 judges, federal judges, and those big disputes go to those panels. So currently, the 2005 to 2007 arbitration is proceeding before a panel of those. So what the mechanism is when they finish that, if the remaining arbitrating states, which are about 7 right now, if they were to suddenly settle, then we would be at risk for going into arbitration for 2023 because they would catch up. Right now, they're behind. But as more states settle, Idaho is in the process of settling. Iowa and Illinois just settled after one of them won their arbitration. So as it goes on, I mean, ideally, we'd all be on the same boat again, but we're not there. So we keep track of it, and we may not know for years if 2023 is going to be an arbitration for us. So we're paying close attention right now.
So we could be arbitrated years
Yes.
after.
Yes, and that's why in 2018, we did a big settlement with the 35-plus states, and that settled from 2004 to 2017-18, and then we extended it to 2022 in 2020. So we're always trying to at least know that we're out of risk, but that's probably the biggest thing that we worry about in the tobacco world.
Okay, so it's really important that we ensure that you folks have the funding you need to make sure that we are doing the enforcement so that if we are ever then arbitrated, it doesn't result in a reduction in funds from the MSA.
Right, and right now that would result in half of the payment approximately. So if we lost 2023, we'd lose $20 million approximately.
That is stunning. Thank you for explaining that to us. And I guess one last comment. I think it was maybe DOTAX. The charts, oh no, I think it was you, Mr. Stacy. The charts of how the tobacco settlement monies, fantastic.
Yeah.
Great way to explain all of this.
That was Chelsea Okamoto. I give her credit for that.
Yes.
Does-
It really helps seeing pictures. Thank you.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Stacy.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, no other questions? All right, moving on to House Bill 1675. This is a measure on general excise tax related to primary care physicians. Members, we've had a number of these kinds of GE tax exemptions come through health. Up first is comments from DOTAX. Thank you.
Chair, Vice Chair, and members, I'm Garrison Kurth on behalf of the Department of Taxation. We stand on our written testimony providing comments, but I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you. Testimony and support from State Health Planning and Development Agency.
Aloha, good morning. Chair Bellotti, Vice Chair Takanuchi, and members Martin, Amato, and Kobayashi. State Health Planning and Development Agency has been charged by the governor with expanding its role back to its almost original purpose back in 1975, which is to be a health oversight agency and not merely a certificate of need organization. As such, our goal is to achieve universal access to high quality, equitable, affordable health care for all. Ironically, one of the hugest barriers to achieving this goal is the workforce shortage issues we face. And this general excise tax is just sort of an annoying element in the whole process. If we could eliminate this, this would very much help with the retention of our existing physicians, particularly those who are on the verge of retirement and feel like this is just one extra burden. So if the physicians in independent practice, about 2/3 of physicians, nurse practitioners, advanced practice people, physician assistants, and others are independent. Many are employed. 1/3 are employed. Those folks are not subject to this, but the independent ones who are the people in the neighbor islands areas, the rural areas, underserved areas, these are the people that are most affected. And we would love to see this tax removed. It doesn't exist in 48 states. And I think it's time for us to see this as not a good public policy. Mahalo.
Thank you, Dr. Lewin. Testimony and support from JABSOM. We also have comments from Tax Foundation of Hawaii.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation. We have submitted testimony just like we have in prior years. I think the most interesting feature of the tax law as it now exists is that hospitals can get out from under the GET, but independent physicians can't. So that is causing a lot of hardship, especially at the rural level, when you have physicians trying to make ends meet and a 4% hit, or 4.5% now, 4.5% hit, basically takes a lot out of their profit margin. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Yamachika. We have members' testimony in support from Disability and Communications Access Board, testimony in support from Hawaii Medical Association, testimony in support from Hawaii ACOG, testimony in support from Philippine Medical Association of Hawaii, support from Maui Orthopedic Institute, support with comments from Indivisible Hawaii Healthcare Team, support with comments from Save Medicaid Hawaii, support with Hawaii Provider Shortage Crisis Task Force, support from Hawaii Institute for Pain, support from Orchid Isle Wellness Center LLC, support from Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, and numerous individuals in support. Any other testifiers in the room? Any other testifiers via Zoom? Members, questions? I have a question for tax. Any definitions recommended? I know you're saying recommended definition for primary care provider.
Right. I don't have one. We haven't looked at it, but we can certainly look at drafting one and get it to you if you'd like.
Okay. Okay. The proposals that have come before us have tried to broadly expand the exemption to like all private practitioners, but this one is more limited. We have to see what can move forward. Do you know what the tax implications are for this smaller group, this smaller universe of individuals?
I don't have numbers today, so we can look at that also.
Okay.
And get back to you, but yeah, I know it's hard when we're not the ones who wrote the bill to come up with a definition to make sure the intent of the bill is exactly as the person or the people who wrote it is, but I think we could look at that for you.
Because this bill has circulated previously, and I believe we've had a broader, we did all physicians, right, and providers. Do you know what that amount was?
I don't today, no.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have it with me, but
Okay.
I can look
Okay.
at prior bills and we can get you that number too, but.
That's important to know because we need to understand what the revenue loss is when we expand this exemption out. But I do think it does cause this kind of strange dynamic in the community that then makes it more difficult for private practitioners and those, as it's been testified, in the rural communities that have to struggle with this burden. Okay. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right, members, any other questions? Oh, yes, Representative Amato.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Dr. Lewin, please. Thank you for your testimony. I'm curious, is there a projection of how many physicians would remain in practice if this exemption were granted?
I don't have that accurately placed, but I have anecdotally talked with physicians statewide who are thinking of retiring and leaving. So I go to the medical meetings around the state to get feedback, and I hear constant comments from people who are saying that they're just going to throw it in. Others who are going to the mainland to practice. I don't think this is a huge issue for the recruitment side as much as it is the retention side at the moment, but I think it's important. I'm sorry I don't have numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewin. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, members, we're moving on to House Bill 1793 relating to hospitals, and this is for security requirements. First up, we have opposition from Department of Health. We have comments from Healthcare Association of Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Paige Heckathorn Choi with the Healthcare Association of Hawaii. Excuse me. We did submit comments on this measure. We do really appreciate the intent, which is to keep our healthcare workers safe and our patients safe. Dr. Luke alluded earlier today that healthcare facilities are becoming more dangerous places to work. And as a result, we've done a lot of work as an association. We know our members have done a lot of work on training members. Those trainings also meet several federal guidelines from OSHA, from the Joint Commission, which is the entity that licenses essentially their certification process becomes a proxy for licensing by the state. A lot of those plans take into account the very unique settings and nature of our facilities, including if they have specialized services such as psychiatric services, residential services, mom and baby services. So we are concerned essentially that this potential recommendation could be very costly and difficult to implement considering the other federal guidelines that we do have to meet. But we are very appreciative that the legislature is looking at ways to protect our workers, to protect our patients. We know there's some bills on the Senate side related to violence against healthcare workers in particular that we've referenced in our testimony. It's SB 2186, and it would increase penalties for assaults against healthcare workers. And it was amended to include our home health workers also who are going into the home. So we did bring that up to the committee. In case it does cross over, we would encourage you all to look at that bill. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Comments from Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, EDCHU. Any other testifiers in the room? Any other testifiers via Zoom? Members, seeing none, members' questions. Ms. Heckathorn, quick question.
Excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
So this would apply to Castle also
Yes.
and Kahimuhala?
That is my understanding, is that the way that the bill is written, it would apply to all hospitals
What
in the
about
state.
Hawaii Health Systems Corporation?
Yes, as long as an entity is licensed as a hospital in the state, and I believe we have 27 of those, all 27 would be subject to this particular bill.
Not just mental health?
No, it would be all licensed hospitals, which would include hospitals with psychiatric services, which would include Castle, would include Queens, and any of the HHSC hospitals. But I believe Kahi is licensed as a hospital, so they would also be folded in.
So section 321-14.5 applies to all hospitals, not just psych hospitals.
My understanding is that that particular section lays out the requirement for Department of Health to license hospitals, and that's why it would apply to everyone, right? Anyone who's licensed as a hospital in the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a couple of questions. Department of Health pointed out that hospitals are already required to develop security management plans based on the organization's facility circumstances. Are those security management plans required to be shared with the Department of Health?
I would have to check into that. I believe that essentially Department of Health is aware of Joint Commission standards and have approved the standards for the Joint Commission. Whether or not the plans specifically are shared, I would have to check into, and I can get back to you. I can just get that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Is there any concern that if the plans are shared publicly, that raises security concerns for the hospitals?
I think I'd have to check with the hospitals to see what the public impact would be, right? Because I do think there's probably some portions that can be shared more, and there's clearly public-facing security measures, right? So if you go to one of our hospitals across the street, right, you do have to go through metal detectors. They have a lot of security personnel at their entrances at the emergency room. There may be internal security procedures that they may not want to share. I think one of the things that we've talked about, for example, is if there's potentially dangerous equipment, right, like MRIs, there might be some sensitive information there. So I can ask our security folks at the hospitals if there's information that could be shared publicly, if that's something that the legislature would be interested in.
Okay. I'm curious, because you mentioned it in your testimony, Senate Bill 2186, and I'm looking at it. That's specifically that's not dealing with plant, the physical plant.
That is
It's dealing
correct.
with workers and
That is
protecting
correct,
workers.
yep.
Okay. And I think some of the impetus for these bills are coming because of the concerns, people bringing guns into hospitals and you folks not having the ability to say, hey, please stop.
Yeah.
And just other things happening,
Yeah.
assaultive behavior on the campuses. Can you explain a little bit about that and what are the hospitals doing in response to those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, I know that security has been increased at several of our facilities. If I may share a couple notes, is one, last year we did support the legislation that you all passed regarding firearms in sensitive places. We were very, very vocal that hospitals and other health facilities should be, right, identified as sensitive places. And we were also able to actually include ourselves into the city and county, right? Any city and county that had a similar bill, we want to make sure we're in there. So in particular with firearms, I know that that's been a big concern, and we've wanted to make sure that we are protected, and I do believe that there's security that has been ramped up in several places. On the second note, we did receive feedback, right, on the fact that a lot of times you do have healthcare workers, right, who may already have access, or there are issues with domestic violence. That is something that we've been talking about a lot more, is the fact that we would generally, I think, support a lot more of these efforts on domestic violence. That's something we've seen. I think we've seen it in the news. That is a concern that some of our security personnel shared with us. That's a little harder for a hospital to be able to manage, right? Because if you have a personal relationship, right, even if you had a security guard, you may not know, right? You may allow a family member in. I think that's where you also sometimes get into issues with family visiting and patients. So it's a really fine line. And I think that's our feeling, is that we do want to make sure that we have really refined policies to manage a lot of these different types of scenarios, but also, right, maintain an environment of caring. And I think that's the balance that we're trying to find there.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Choi Hackathorn. Any other questions? Members, I want to acknowledge, thank you. I want to acknowledge that we did receive late testimony, I believe, in support from Hawaii Association of Professional Nurses. So we did receive that. Members, seeing no other bills on the agenda, we're going to recess, as is the practices of this committee. We will take up decision-making at 11:30 a.m. We have a 10-minute break before our 9:30 joint with housing, which I believe they will be coming in here. So we are in recess. Yes, recess. Morning and happy Valentine's Day. Today is February 14, 2024. This is our 10:30 a.m. agenda for the Joint Committees on Health and Homelessness and Corrections, Military, and Veterans Affairs. Members, as a matter of just some housekeeping, for those of you who may be on Zoom, if we lose you, please, we will reconvene and renotice this hearing. Please contact any of our technicians if you are there. And don't use any backgrounds. Members, we have one bill on this hearing, and just for your planning purposes, we are going to defer DM until 10:45 a.m. tomorrow in this room. We will be deferring DM for this, just for your purposes. On Thursday, February 15th, again, room 329. With that, members, first up, we have relating to homelessness, House Bill 2084, which establishes a vacated encampment cleanup task force to identify potential entities to enter into intergovernmental agreements to coordinate the cleanup of vacated encampments located on lands managed by the U.S. Army Garrison Hawaii and appropriates funds. Members, we have testimony comments from Department of Transportation. Comments via Zoom or in person by Attorney General's office.
Good morning, chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committee. I am Deputy Attorney General Marjorie Lau, and we have provided our written comments, and I'll just highlight a few. One is that the bill includes several provisions directing the United States Army Garrison Hawaii to take certain actions. Generally, the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution forbids the states from regulating federal property or instrumentalities unless Congress has authorized it. We are not aware of any such congressional authority in this case. The second point I would note is that it is not clear upon what basis or authority non-federal entities, including the state, are authorized or obligated to clean up lands under the management of the United States Army Garrison Hawaii. We have additional comments regarding the makeup of the task force, the expenditures or appropriations regarding or for the Department of Land and Natural Resources and the Department of Transportation, as well as some items that could be clarified to make it clear what exactly the bill is trying to achieve. I'm available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we have comments from Hawaii Military Affairs Council. Any other testifiers in the room? Health Committee members, questions? Representative Martin.
For the AG's office. Yeah, for the AG's office, please. I'm not sure if you know the answer, but you're the only one here to ask questions. Yep. So my concern with this bill is that it's taking something that perhaps the federal government is currently paying for the cleanup, and their state will then take on that expense. I don't want to transfer that job from federal funds to state funds, but I don't know what do you think?
I mean, so that goes to kind of my second point was these are lands, it doesn't really say whether it's owned or leased, but managed by the Army. So I'm not really clear why the state would be going in or under what authority would have to go in onto the federally managed lands because they have jurisdiction. So that's not clear to me. I do understand, just from what I've heard kind of on the side, is that both the state and the federal agencies or entities are actually working together already, but I don't know for a fact the details of that.
Okay, before there's further questions, members, I want to note that we received testimony with comments from Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness, Mr. Mizuno, as well as testimony in support from Castle and Cook Homes Hawaii, Inc. Okay, any further questions from the health side? Questions, Chair, on your committee?
Any questions? Seeing none?
I have a few questions from the Attorney General's office. I understand from the author of this bill that it might have actually been the USAGA's suggestion that we set up an intergovernmental task force as a tool to encourage collaboration. So given that, I mean, I think, is there a way to do this so that it's more like may versus shall, and to invite the USAGH to allay your concerns about the inability for us to mandate the U.S. Army Garrison of Hawaii from participating?
I think that would be one way to address it, is that we can't really tell them what to do. And if the intent is to do a collaborative task force, that's a little bit different, because even this includes, and I didn't go into in my first comments, but it seems to bring in other entities to be part of the task force, but to the extent, I think our view is that they may not necessarily be able to tell the state how to spend its money. So I think we have to be careful, really, I think the intent's probably good, it's just how we're trying to achieve that.
And then, are you aware of any kind of intergovernmental agreements that do exist between some of our federal partners as well as our state partners?
Regarding homeless?
Not regarding homeless, but just generally.
I think there are generally intergovernmental agreements between state and federal.
There is, much like there is MOUs or MOAs between city and counties and state and federal, and there are MOUs of a sort.
Right. So, and I'm not clear whether this is doing it just between the two, state and federal, or it seems to bring in others, but I don't know if they wouldn't really be part of the intergovernmental agreements. So I'm not sure clear what their role was. So there's some of those details. I think that's where there's some question that could be addressed.
Maybe it should be an intergovernmental task force, and we not put it into statute. But with that questions answered, thank you. That's very helpful for you to clarify what we should be doing with our federal and state jurisdiction concerns. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, members, we will again defer for decision-making till 10:45 a.m. tomorrow in this room. Thank you, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Happy Valentine's Day. Good morning, committee. Happy Valentine's Day. We are convening our 11:15 a.m. agenda for the Committee on Health and Homelessness. This is a decision-making meeting only in conference room 329. Members, this is for House Bill 407 relating to health, which is a short-form bill that was referred to the Committee on Health and Homelessness. Our consideration of the measure today is for decision-making purposes only to insert substantive comments provisions into the short-form bill. A public hearing will be scheduled at a later date at which time testimony will be accepted. Pursuant to Rule 11.54 of the Rules of the House of the Representatives, the chair's proposal is to amend House Bill 407 by inserting substantive contents within the scope of the bill's title and to issue a committee report recommending recommittal of the bill to this committee for further consideration. The committee referral for HB 407 HG1 will also be reviewed by the Speaker. A proposed House Draft 1 has been prepared and is to be distributed to the members. Members, I want to provide a little bit of context, what is in this bill, and then describe the purpose of this bill. As you guys were provided at our last meeting, the January 17th, 2024 AG's opinion was distributed to you then. What I wanted to share with the committee and the public was that there was quite a tremendous amount of discussion about what was in the AG's opinion, and secondarily, about what was intended by the original law that is the subject of the opinion, Act 32 from 2019. Some of the discussion over the last few weeks, and again, we are putting this into short form bill because there was a lot of questions around this AG's opinion and the Act 32. Questions arise as to who the act was intended to apply to, what can be done through the implementing agency and the rulemaking process in light of the law and what the law was intended to do, and what could be done between now and the sunsetting of the entire statute on June 30th, 2025. What this House Draft 1 represents is the culmination of those discussions with other lawmakers, deputy attorney generals, staff of the DCCA, the Board of Nursing, and the Professional and Vocational Licensing Division. And I hope I have all of those agencies correct. It also, again, involved other lawmakers. But at the end of the day, members, this is a recommendation by the chair based on all of those discussions and what this bill proposes to do. And I even have to apologize, members. You can see my handwritten writing on page 3. What this bill does is 4 important things. In light of the AG's opinion, it creates a further exemption for persons holding a valid certification as a doula or lactation specialist by a nationally recognized organization that is approved by the department. The second thing this bill does is creates a working group, a birth attending working group led by the Attorney General's office and a number of key governmental officials who have a lot of, who will have better and greater expertise around this issue of birth attendants, doulas, and all of these other birth workers that are, that we need to consider for further legislation. This working group will also include subject matter experts, community folks, and you will see the whole list of other members who are part of this Attorney General-led working group. Members, this proposal was designed off of the Uniform Parentage Act working group that we did enact into law last session that deals with very difficult issues. And that's why we put this with Attorney General's office. And I did consult with the Attorney General's office and understanding the sensitivity to this, she has stated that, of course, they would be willing to work on this if needed. Finally, for this area, the third thing implemented is the creation of a Legislative Reference Bureau study that will look at a compilation of laws in other states, an examination of the regulatory framework for birth attendants throughout the nation, a literature review of best practices, and make recommendations for the regulation of birth attendants. Members, I apologize. The fourth thing that this bill does, this draft does, is, and I want to point it out on page 4, is that it amends in the section to address the issue raised in the AG's opinion about whether a grandparent is prohibited. And so it adds here, nothing in this chapter shall prohibit a person from administering care to a person's spouse, domestic partner, parent, sibling, child, or grandchild. Members, I recognize that this might not be all of what anybody wanted, or it may be too much of what some people wanted. But this is a draft, and again, as I was stated before, our hope is that there will be a continued opportunity to have this bill heard and to go through the process. Are there any questions or comments by the members? Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate the work that you've done, and I'll be voting no because I think that this bill will be coming up next year for sure when it sunsets, and there will be more information, a study available that time, and recommendations that are created in conjunction with midwives. So I would like to wait for that time, but I appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Martin.
Similar comments. This is exceptionally unusual procedure to have a bill of this substance come up through a short form bill with short notice. Filing deadline is tomorrow for lateral. This bill has a single referral, as do almost all short form bills. So, I don't even see the reference to LRB study in the bill.
If you look at
I'm
page
sorry.
7.
Page 7, yes, I see that. Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate the comments, Representative, and I assure you, again, there were lots of discussions following the dropping of the opinion on opening day, and so understandably so, I respect your comments. I will also say that short-form bills are precisely for this type of reason. I can remember passing and introducing an HD1 for the Able Savings Act at a time when we just discovered, after the opening of a legislative session, that the Congress was moving to enact federal legislation that would enable states to assist disabled children with savings accounts. And when I was health chair then, we moved quickly, and this body moved. This body moved. So I don't think that it is impossible to do that, but I do respect your comments. And you have been here longer than me, kind sir, with your grayer hair, although I'm starting to catch up with you. But I appreciate your comments. Okay, members, Chair's recommendation is to pass House Bill 407 with amendments and to recommend House Bill 407 to this committee for a future public hearing. Vice Chair.
Members voting on HB 407, Chair's recommendation is to pass the short form bill with the HD1 to recommit for future public hearing. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Amato.
Aye.
Representative Iligan. Representative Kobayashi.
No.
Representative Martin, no vote. Representative Nishimoto.
Reservations.
Representative Garcia. Chair, recommendations adopted.
Thank you, members. We are adjourned on our 11:15 a.m. agenda, and we'll be reconvening in 6 minutes for our 11:30 a.m. So you're welcome to take a break. Thank you. We're done. Good morning, committee members. Today is Wednesday, February 14, 2024. We are opening our amended notice of decision-making agenda for 11:30 a.m. This is the Committee on Health and Homelessness. Members, we've heard these bills previously, so first up is House Bill 2800. This is relating to the Mental Health Code Review. Chair's recommendation is to pass an HD1 after having consulted with the Attorney General, who is willing to convene this committee and has some thoughts on how to maybe expedite this a little bit more, but I will let the next committee determine whether or not they will do that. But based on those conversations, Chair's recommendation is to have the HD1 at page 2 change the date from beginning July 1st, 2025 to beginning July 1st, 2024. They have the capacities to start it now. Change the Department of Health at line 6 to Department of the Attorney General. Delete from membership on page 2 at line 18, the Director of Health or the Director's designee. Move the Attorney General to the first member of the Advisory Committee. After a representative from the Prosecutor's Office, add in, quote, a representative from the Office of the Public Defender to be selected by the State Public Defender. Amend a representative from a private nonprofit human services organization focused on ending or preventing homelessness to be selected by the Director of Health to the Director of Human Services. That has is the more correct agency from which to have this person appointed. Add after the above member a representative from the private acute care hospitals who offer psychiatric mental health services to be selected by the Director of Health. Members, this is because Department of Health and private acute care hospitals are part of this system where they receive MH1s and MH4s. Insert a defective effective date and tech amendments identified by HMSO. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Members voting on HB 2800, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Amato?
Aye.
Representative Iligan? Representative Kobayashi?
Aye.
Representative Martin? Representative Nishimoto? Representative Garcia? Chair, recommendations adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to House Bill 2182 relating to community health workers. Members, there was a lot of discussion and we learned a lot through the testimony in this bill relating to community health workers. Chair's recommendation is to pass an HD1 that at page 3, line 19, changes Ka'u Community Health Worker Pilot Program to a Rural Community Health Worker Pilot Program. We're going to expand this to be more than just one community. As we understand, the Department of Health has been doing a lot of work with community health workers throughout the state. At page 3, line 21, insert a 3-year quote, rural community health worker pilot, and throughout strike as appropriate references to Ka'u and change to rural. In subsection D at page 6, per OHA's requested amendments for the nonprofit organization contracted via this pilot program, add 4, the capacity to provide culturally competent training and services. In subsection G at page 8, add a definition for rural that, quote, means an area that is currently served by a critical access hospital as defined in HRS section 346-1. Members, this is in reference to our series of laws related to rural and health care. So this really ties it very closely to our rural health plan. Any tech amendments identified by HMSO and a defective date. In the committee report, I'm going to request that the Department of Health, Mr. Kim, based on their extensive work on community health workers through their numerous federal grants that was described at the hearing, price out cost for administering 2 pilots, one on the island of Hawaii and one on the island of Kauai, so that we can be better informed about what the cost of this pilot program may be for our rural communities. Chairs, members, questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2182, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments, noting the presence of all members for the rest of these votes unless otherwise noted. Any reservations or noes?
Reservations.
Reservations for Reps. Kobayashi and Garcia. All others vote aye. Chair, recommendations adopted.
Thank you. Members, House Bill 2544 relating to medical transportation, another good bill with a lot of good conversations, looking at how we might better help our rural communities as other states have begun to do. So Chair's recommendation is to pass a HB 2544 with a House Draft 1 that strikes on page 3 the section on allowing medical providers to reserve and pay for flights. We're really going to focus this pilot program on flying individuals and their caregivers, not doctors to neighbor islands, but rather patients and their caregivers to a place where they might need to get care. Strike creation of essential rural medical air transport revolving fund. At this point, direct the blank appropriation to Department of Health, blank out 12 in the 12 round trips. So let's have a better discussion about what this might look like. Tech amendments as identified by HMSO and a defective effective date. Members, questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2544, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, Chair, recommendations adopted.
Members, last on our 11:30 a.m. agenda is House Bill 2744, another great effort to make sure that we make advances related to oral health. This is the creation of an oral health task force. Members, Chair's recommendation is to pass a HD1 per OIP, deleting the language that exempts the task force from Chapter 92 sunshine requirements, responding to the testimony asking for specific practitioners, diversity of county representatives, and community advocates. Another amendment will be to amend the membership of the task force so that 1, the representative of the County of Maui is from private practice dental community who works with the Medicaid population or other Medicaid-associated dentists. The representative of the County of Kauai is a community oral health representative, and adding a representative from the City and County of Honolulu who is from the private practice dental community who works with the Medicaid population or other Medicaid-associated dentists. The representative for the City and County of Honolulu will be appointed by the Speaker. Striking at page 7, item 21, as this is now subsumed in the county representatives. Blanking out the appropriations and inserting a request for those appropriations in the committee report. Technical amendments from HMSO and defective date. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2744, recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, Chair, recommendations adopted.
Members, moving to our 8:30 a.m. agenda for this morning, Chair's recommendation for House Bill 1852, making an appropriation to the Department of Emergency Services of the City and County of Hawaii, is to blank out the appropriation, insert it to the committee report, change in the text of the bill as a grant and aid to, as an appropriation to the Emergency Services Department, and insert after Urban Honolulu on line 16 as a continuation of its piloting of its community paramedicine program pursuant to HRS section 46-195. And then asking that the next committee, should they look favorably upon this, may have to look at whether or not whether or not an appropriation can be made directly to the Emergency Services Department of the City and County of Honolulu, either in the budget or in this appropriation bill. Members, the change for the grant and aid is that grant and aids are a very specific term in our HRS. There's also a specific section that says grant and aid to counties for county capital improvement projects. So this hopefully clarifies it and makes an appropriation possible. Any technical amendments identified by HMSO and a defective date. Members, any comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1852, recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, Chair, recommendations adopted.
Members, Chair's recommendation on House Bill 1941 is to defer decision-making tomorrow to our 10:45 a.m. agenda. We are wanting to still see a copy of the governor's message. We understand that it's better formed. We had a lot of questions. There were some strikeouts from this existing bill. So we want to make sure our requests align with the GM. Members, questions, comments, or concerns? Members, moving on to House Bill 2341 relating to the funding for the Tobacco Enforcement Special Fund. Members, again, this is another bill that's moved through numerous times. This time around, we learned, and I learned something new. I did not understand about the arbitrations and that there could be potential clawbacks. And that is a huge thing to realize, because if other states are seeing monies clawed back in the millions of dollars, we need to make sure we do not do that. So Chair's recommendation is to pass this out with a defective date, technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style as identified by HMSO, and that's it, members. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 2341, recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Reservations for Rep. Garcia. All others vote aye. Chair, recommendations adopted.
Members, Chair's recommendation on House Bill 1675 is also to pass out of House Draft 1. Again, this is a measure that we've seen in numerous forms. It really highlights the disparity between the treatment of private independent practice doctors, particularly in the rural communities, who are subject to the GET tax. And so Chair's recommendation is to adopt Technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style, as identified by HMSO. Adopt the DOE tax amendment for a postponed effective date of January 1st, 2026, and further defecting that date so that it's our standard 3,000 date. Members, questions, comments, or concerns?
What about definition of primary care?
I will allow that. I don't have a definition at this point in time, so what we can do, Representative, to address your concern is ask that in the committee report, maybe we can request, HMA, Hawaii Medical Association, to come forward with a definition for the primary care provider that we are looking to try to narrow the scope for. All right, members, any further questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1675, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Members, on House Bill 1793 relating to hospitals, Chair's recommendation here is to pass out a House Draft 1. There's a lot of concerns about safeties of hospitals and facilities. So, but we need to balance it against what are probably already existing requirements. And instead of requiring that each hospital holding a license have all of these listed items of things, require that each hospital develop and maintain a security management plan that is shared with the Department of Health, and a defective date and any tech amendments identified by HMSO for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns?
Effective date, please.
Yes, if I didn't say that, a defective date also included. All right, seeing no questions, comments, or concerns, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1793, recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations or noes? Hearing none, Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Members, we are at the end of our agenda. Thank you very much, and
Thank
we'll see
you.
you on the floor. We're adjourned.